what we wanted, what we felt we wanted as the first city council, what we wanted Temecula to be, has continued. Each successive city council has kept in mind what we had in mind, and which is enormously pleasing to me.
And then my wife and I moved here to Temecula. This was a place I never wanted to leave, and I still feel that way.
Well, I think we realized that 97,000 acres surrounded by the Cleveland National Forest and Mount Palomar and all of that was really a beautiful place. From Mount Palomar to hike in the pine trees was just minutes away, and with the flourishing of wine country and all the things that. I think that 100 years from now, it's going to become very famous. It's famous really now. It happened because Kaiser did a 97,000 acre master plan community. They laid out agriculture, wine country, horses, all the different recreational areas. So the blueprint is there, and it's filling itself out now. It's stunning, really, to watch the growth of all these different activities, from employment to education.
I guess 1970, first vintage where we harvested grapes was 1972, and it was only 1975 then when the winery started on a very small scale. We were always, it was his vision that the business would largely be run on a tourism basis, which I had mentioned was not the standard with California wineries. And so we did 1978. I was working here at that time. We had a single wide mobile home that we were serving wine to the occasional visitor who showed up. There was no wine country, really. And Callaway Winery, the other winery, also had a single wide mobile home tasting room. And so my dad had determined that he wanted to build a tasting room. So we had the first permanent non-mobile home tasting room in Temecula, which opened in 1978. And that year also the Salurzo Winery opened. I remember because I sold grapes to them that year. And that's probably the very early beginnings.
So we were in last place behind, I think Paul Hampton was out front and Tommy Hotchkiss with the sharecropper. And then I remember being behind the Pattons. The dust was so thick, we finally just said, Dad, I said, you gotta go out that way. So he took out across country. We went off this embankment down, and so we passed a couple tractors. So now it was just Paul Hampton and the sharecropper. So we went down through the riverbed and we're gaining on them. I mean, the sodbuster is coming to life. And here we come, around the bend. Paul Hampton's up on the bank, having trouble shifting and getting it in gear. Tommy Hotchkiss and Warner over here, their floorboard is on fire, but they're still going. And we snaked through there and came around the corner, made a little 90-degree turn right onto Main Street. And the streets were lined with people. So there was probably 300-400 people there. And for Temecula at that time, that was a lot. And we got the checkered flag.
Coming to this community has been absolutely fantastic. Allowed so many opportunities. I remember a friend of mine asking me, hey, you want to help at the Balloon and Wine Festival? We need someone to collect money. And I said, I guess so. And he goes, I said, what does that mean? He said, well, it means we have to be there at 2 in the morning. And back then, the Balloon and Wine Festival was on Cherry Street, back in the back, off of now Diaz Road, back in the back, in the hills back there. And we would go and we would sit there and we'd collect cars, start coming in at 2, 3, 4 in the morning because they wanted to be there for the balloon ascension. And it was neat to know that that's how I started with the Balloon and Wine Festival. Who would have thought that a couple of years later I'd be the entertainment chairman for 5 years and brought in groups like Jan and Dean, the Beach Boys, Chuck Berry, just you name it. We were Lou Rawls. We had a blast, and you know what? It was some great times, and the Balloon and Wine Festival still exists to this day.
I believe it was November 7th, 1989. We were on the ballot for incorporation of the City of Temecula. We were also on the ballot, I believe, to take over the Temecula Community Services District, which funded the recreational elements of the city. And the voters passed, I think, by 87% the vote to incorporate. We also passed another thing that was really of controversy at that time was the name of the city, because this has always been Old Town Temecula, and people liked the name of Temecula. But the master developer, Bedford Properties, had brought forth this name of Rancho California. And then they wanted to call it Rancho Temecula. Well, there was probably 50 other ranchos in the state of California at that time. So we didn't want to be just another Rancho Temecula in the state of California. So we decided to just leave the name Temecula. Nobody knows the name Temecula, but we left the name Temecula on the ballot. People voted for 80 some odd % of that, and they chose the name Temecula, chosen by the people of the city at that time. And it was great. It was fantastic.
We used to say, and to a degree we still do, Temecula was a snapshot in time that will probably never be duplicated. It was a little tiny miracle in this little bastion of southwest Riverside County where a certain group of people were called together and got together and found a way to mesh and knit together in a way that was unselfish, and in a way that was innovative, and in a way that everybody's talents shined. And I don't just mean from council members. I think we have close to 600 nonprofits in this area. I think it's more than that. And everybody played their part in a way that I wish we could tell everybody's story. I can tell you it's another part of the stitch in the fabric for all of us. And the city is replete with those stories. We couldn't cover them all, but so many people, hundreds of people gave.
Reagan talked about in one of his speeches, as the President of the United States, he talked about Temecula and the fact that the entire community came together to build that sports park. And he talked about the rest of the nation coming together to do things like that.
I hope my legacy is that I was one of lots and lots of people who were excited about building a community and stepped forward at the very right time with the very right people and the very right opportunity to do some really good things. And although I have now moved from Temecula, this is home. And so when I drive here, I say, I'm coming home.
June 2nd, 1992. I was working in the radio station in the morning doing our show. I got a phone call that there had been a traffic accident by Temecula Valley High School. It was still a small enough town that when there was a traffic accident, people called the radio station. So long story short, the Border Patrol was pursuing a Chevy Suburban full of undocumented migrants. They ended up speeding through the school zone just as Temecula Valley High was starting classes at the beginning of the day, and the Suburban crashed into an Acura driven by John Davis and cut the Acura in half. 3 people in that car were killed, 2 students walking on their way to class were killed, and one of the undocumented migrants was killed. So that was obviously a very traumatic day, a very big challenge for the community.
And so the debris clogged up in the Old Town area and it dammed, and as a result the Murrieta Creek crested and flooded Old Town, and we were assembled back then. Here I've been on the job for just a few weeks, and we were assembled with, a lot of FEMA and public safety agencies, and trying to figure out, okay, what do we do in a national disaster like this? But we came together as a city, we responded quickly, and we ultimately got some federal funds to unearth Old Town with all the mud and debris. But that was an eye-opener for us, that we needed to be very proactive as a city to make sure that our conveyance systems were free from growth and were free to flow in the year of a 100-year flood. And that wasn't even a 100-year flood, so it had caused significant devastation in the Old Town area that we're trying to begin to revive, because it was in very bad shape, and it was not the jewel that you see here today.
So I've been here a long time, and I've seen an awful lot of changes. The vast majority of those are positive, and the things that weren't positive we dealt with in a positive manner to make things better. So I just want to say to all my friends, everyone I've worked with over the years, maybe most importantly the citizens and the voters of Temecula who have allowed me this privilege, and it has indeed been a privilege. And I wish those who come after me the very, very best, and let them know that if they screw up, I'm still living here, and they're going to hear about it.
And it required a 2/3 majority. Everybody said that we couldn't get a 2/3 majority, and 3 weeks before the election, Pat Birdsall, who I just love to death, Pat Birdsall said, "I believe in the citizens of Temecula, and not only do I believe that Measure C will pass, I believe it'll pass by a 3/4 majority, 3/4." And I always say she was wrong. It passed by 77%. So it was an amazing accomplishment for the city at that time. That was in 1997. 21 years later, it's generated close to $80 million in public services, specifically for community services, parks and recreation. And so that's something that I'm very proud of. That was a huge challenge.
If I were to say, do I have a legacy? I think my legacy is that I have worked and been a part of creating a community that families love to live in, seniors love to live in, that there is a quality of life that's unmatched anywhere else, I think, in the county.
Temecula has a good history, and Temecula has a very unique way of coming together. When I was working for San Diego State University, I had represented the campus at the Ecological Reserve that's just up the hill here. And there was a proposed gravel mine just adjacent to the university's property and right above the hill from the city. And that brought together an amazing coalition of individuals and organizations from around the region, recognizing that it was just the wrong thing in the wrong place. You know, nobody was opposed to mining or, materials extraction. It was just the location, and it sat in one of the most sensitive places in Southern California, above one of the last fully protected free-flowing rivers in California, in a extremely sacred site for Pechanga, an area that has unique, endemic, and rare species that occur there and pretty much nowhere else in the world. in the last inland to coastal wildlife corridor in Southern California. You know, for all of those reasons, it was kind of like putting a rock concert next to a monastery. And this coalition formed, and I'll never forget seeing the first planning commission hearing that was located here. The county actually moved the planning commission hearing here into the city of Temecula, and I want to say over 3,000 people showed up. And it was at that moment I realized, you know, Temecula was such a unique community, and it was still the largest attended hearing in Riverside's history. And to see all of that, to see that community, I just fell in love with Temecula because, you know, they know how to get things done.
It's plain to see why people want to come here. I mean, that's why we have such a huge tourism industry, is because it's beautiful. The wine country, the Old Town District, we just have a lot of very nice amenities that a lot of cities just don't have. And we still have a small town feel. I mean, especially if you come down here on a Friday or Saturday night and you're walking the streets, listening to the bands, you almost always run into somebody that you know. So that's what's really kind of cool, especially if you've been here any period of time at all. So that's what I love about Temecula.
The other thing that's really unique to this community in Temecula is volunteerism. I'd never really experienced anything like it until I came here. We had more volunteers than we had employees when we opened because there was such a love for the hospital and everybody wanted to be a part of it. We have almost 300 volunteers now at the hospital, all age ranges, and they are there, you know, day and night, chaplains, therapy dogs, people that want to, you know, be musicians. I mean, all walks of life are volunteering. And the other volunteer groups in the community as well get active in the hospital. So we have, you know, the Girl Scouts will make, you know, blankets for the patients. We'll have the Assistance League donate teddy bears for children in the emergency room. Another group's donating hearts that are pillows for people after open heart surgery can hug. So there's always other volunteers that are, again, supporting the hospital. It's wonderful in this community.
Yeah, I'd say one of the biggest challenges that I was directly involved in or saw was several years ago, you know, really analyzing the fiscal health of the city of Temecula as we do 5-year projections. And we really came to the conclusion that the cost of providing a high level of public safety services was exceeding our projected revenue. And that was troubling. That truly weighed heavily on me and what we were going to do about that, you know, whether it was going to be sacrificing services or sacrificing public safety services to meet budget goals, really was troubling. And I give a ton of credit to the Temecula City Council for having the backbone to put a measure on and let the voters decide. And that measure, of course, was Measure S, and which was approved by the voters in November of 16. But that was a defining moment. In my humble opinion, was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, defining moment to shape the city of Temecula in its 30-year history.
I think if anybody wants to talk about a legacy, it's how happy and content our residents are, and as you know, my pin says, how proud they are of the city that they live in. And really, it is a team effort. Our residents are so helpful in telling us what they want because we're all out there in the community and we're accessible because we're just neighbors. We're just neighbors who have the opportunity to serve. And I guess that's the legacy, is just looking back over the city as a whole and seeing how proud everyone is to live here. And that really makes me proud.
To reference Perry Peters' famous visioning letter, entrusting the city to future generations, written the day after Temecula's first mayor and city council were sworn into office.
We are the caretakers of the soul of Temecula. May you enjoy the civic inheritance we pass on to you, like a baton in a relay race. We choose to think it is a positive sign that our city was born between Thanksgiving and the miracle of Christmas. As you get ready to receive the baton, let civic pride not greed, motivate you to move forward. From silent, unseen bleachers, we cheer you on. God be with you.
We shall continue to move forward, revering our historic cultural roots, preserving our high quality of life, and creating a healthy and prosperous community the only way we know how, the Temecula way. Cheers to the City of Temecula on the first 30 years of old traditions and new opportunities. Here's to the next 30.